Howdy, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Fort Worth Property Management Podcast. This is episode 7. And in episode 7, we are going to cover the possibility that there's a way for you to purchase a house and not have to pay the full mortgage. Doesn't that sound incredible? Today, we are going to be talking about house hacking, what exactly that is, the ins, outs, and how it works. So this episode is tailored for all real estate investors, but specifically for those first-time buyers, first-time real estate investors, young professionals, anybody who's afraid to jump into the real estate market super quickly, anybody who feels priced out of the market right now, like they can't afford a mortgage of a house. This episode is going to pertain to all of you. So today we're going to be breaking down what exactly house hacking is, how it works, the pros, cons, the risk, all of it, and whether or not it makes sense for you to begin your real estate investing journey through house hacking here in 2026. It's going to be a great episode. All right, welcome back to episode 7 of the Fort Worth Property Management Podcast. I am your host, Mason Arispe. I am the Operations and Business Development Manager here at First Choice Property Management in Fort Worth, Texas. Episode 7 is a very exciting one. Episode 7 is part 1 of our investment strategy series. Throughout the next few months, we're going to go into different investment strategies that real estate investors use to purchase rental properties. Today's episode, part 1, is covering house hacking. One of the most popular investment strategies that I've seen across TikTok, Instagram Reels, all of that. People love talking about house hacking because it's applicable to so many young people who want to get into real estate investing, but who might be a little bit nervous to jump right in. And so now, along with that does come the TikToks that hype it up, that say, yeah, you buy a duplex, you'll never have to pay your mortgage, and you can live in the other half. And unfortunately, that's not always true. So in today's episode, we are going to go through the ins and outs of house hacking. We're going to talk through pros, cons, breaking the numbers down and how exactly it works. And then we're going to do our best to make sure that house hacking is a fit for you, because it's not for everybody, but it is a very great way to get started in real estate. Now, before we dive deep into house hacking, defining it and getting in all of that, we are going to start with a popular segment around here. It's called Behind Closed Doors. It's where we give you a look into our operations here at First Choice Property Management, kind of tell you the ins and outs of our business, any big things that we're working on, and then kind of keep an accountability scorecard with our listeners. We want you to know what's going on. We want you to know that we're growing and that we're staying up with the times and that we're a solid management company. So we're going to start with our door count, which has increased since the last podcast that we released. Our door count is currently at 527 properties. We picked up a good amount of properties towards the end of January. And so right now we're sitting at 527. We currently have 18 houses on the market, which is so great to hear, because in having 18 properties on the market, that's roughly 3% of our book of business, which is great. I don't know if you remember from when we first started doing Behind Closed Doors, this would be episode 3 or sometime around then. We had about 35 properties on the market. So we've cut that almost in half in about a month to a month and a half. The market is slowly picking up. We're getting right towards the middle of February. Things typically pick up a lot in March, but it's been a good January and February so far. Applications have been coming in. We haven't seen market rents start to tick up yet. There are still a lot of houses that we're having to lower down into what is now the market rate after a slower November and December. The average rental price for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in Fort Worth right now is $2,050. That's right around the same price as it was last podcast. And so not a lot of movement. That's probably what we're seeing. November, December, we saw a lot of price decreases because there was a lot less movement, and due to a busier market coming around at the beginning of the year, tenants are renting properties, but there's not so many tenants that it's calling for price increases or the ability to list higher at higher market rates yet. So it makes sense that it's steadied out right now. And some operation stuff here at First Choice. First Choice is having a very big push on growing. So we are trying to acquire new properties to manage, and then we're also pushing 5-star Google reviews. So we've been sending owners and tenants a lot of requests for Google reviews to try and bump our rating on Google as well. And So that's a quick look into our business. That will conclude our segment of Behind Closed Doors, a little look into First Choice's daily operations. And so now what we want to know about, right? House hacking. What is house hacking? So a very clear definition of what house hacking is it's a fancy way of saying you are renting out a part of the property that you're also living in. This can look very different based on the property that you have, but you are renting out a portion of the property while living in it at the same time. House hacking is most commonly referred to when talking about a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, okay? So when you're looking at these smaller multifamily properties, a lot of people will say you should house hack it. A duplex is one property that has 2 units under the same roof. Same thing with a triplex with 3 units and a fourplex with 4 units. And so it's that amount of units under one roof. Okay, so let's take a duplex for example. House hacking a duplex would mean you purchase the entire property. So you own 2 units. Duplexes here in Fort Worth, they're typically side by side. On the left side, you have 1 unit. On the right side, you have another. They're attached by one middle wall, but they're 2 separate places of living. They have 2 separate garages or carports, 2 separate living rooms, 6 bedrooms. You kind of get where I'm going, right? And so you would purchase the duplex in its entirety. You would move into one side and that would be your place of residence. And then you would rent out the other side to a tenant. That's the most commonly used example with house hacking, is doing that with the duplex. So shoot, if you ramp it up and buy a fourplex, you live in 1 unit, you can rent out 3 other units. This is why it's extremely attractive, because you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You solve the problem of where am I going to live? You're buying a primary residence, but then you also get to begin your real estate investing journey very quickly by becoming a landlord almost immediately. That's the most common example of house hacking, is purchasing one of these smaller multifamily properties, living in 1 unit and renting out the others. Now, there are a few other ways that we've seen this done. Sometimes they're not even tagged as house hacking, and sometimes you kind of have to go out of your way a little bit to make it happen. So another common way is by getting a roommate. And there's nothing flashy about getting a roommate. There's no fancy house hacking name or anything like that. But let's simply say you bought a single family home, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 1,500 square feet, and you're living in it for a few months, and then you realize, I have 2 bedrooms that I never use. I haven't even gone into one for a few months. So you find a coworker or a close friend or somebody that you know who needs a place to live. And so they move in and become your roommate and they pay you rent. Technically, that is house hacking. You're living in the property, but you're renting out one of your rooms at the same time. And so it's solving those 2 big issues again, right? You still have a place to live, and then you're also not having to cover your full mortgage. It's being offset by the rent income that's coming in. And so house hacking can be done in that way as well, by just getting a roommate in the home that you live in. And then one last way that I've seen house hacking done is by properties that have either an ADU, accessory dwelling unit, an ADU, or a garage that is detached from the house. So, some houses have the long driveway and the garage that's at the very back, but it's separate from the house. It's very common for those detached garages to be converted into an ADU. And so they actually put a wall where the garage door was. They build a small kitchen, a small bedroom. They put a little living room in there and a front door. And they find a tenant to live in that unit that is detached from their house. It's still on the same property, so it's still your primary residence, but it's being rented out to somebody and they have the privacy of their own spot, kind of in your backyard or wherever the garage is located at. So I went to Texas Tech. That's in Lubbock, Texas. That's kind of in West Texas, up in the Panhandle. It's very common in Lubbock for there to be an ADU or even like a little apartment complex right in your backyard. So as college students, we would live in the main house, and then those who wanted their own place, they would rent the little apartment or the ADU that was right in the alley. It was really, really cool. It was about an 800 square foot place, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and it's right in your backyard. This is a very good third example of how even those who have already purchased their property can begin their real estate investing journey without having to move immediately. And so by turning that garage into an ADU or into a little apartment out back, you can begin to find a tenant who's willing to live there. It'll be a little bit lower of a rental price, but that rental income again, will offset your mortgage and help pay some of that, and then also solves the problem of you still needing a place to stay. And so those are a few different examples of what house hacking is, how it works, and how you can begin with your real estate investing journey fairly quickly. The reason that this is so attractive for younger real estate investors, for those who are starting their investing journey, is for a few different reasons. The first is that it opens up owner-occupied financing for your mortgage. So without getting too technical too quick, if you were to purchase a rental property, you would have to put anywhere from 20 to 25% down as a down payment on that property. So in Fort Worth, where home prices are somewhere around $300,000, that means you, as a real estate investor, would have to put down $60,000 to $75,000 as a down payment to even buy the house, which not everybody has. Let's be real. Not everybody has $75,000 sitting in a bank account saying, yeah, I want to buy this house and let somebody else live in it. It's just not common, right? So instead of putting 25% down, by living in the property, it's now an owner-occupied home, which means you would qualify for a lower down payment. When a home is owner-occupied, you can put as little as 3.5% down. So on that same $300,000 house, instead of putting 75% down, you're now putting $10,000 down. That's a big difference. Still a lot of money, but way more doable than $75,000. So one of the biggest draws to house hacking is you qualify for owner-occupied financing, and you can put significantly less down while beginning your real estate and journey fairly quick. Second biggest draw to house hacking is that you qualify for lower interest rates. If you purchase just a rental flat out, a lender will charge higher interest rate than if you're occupying the home yourself. So you will qualify for slightly lower interest rates as well. And then, of course, the biggest draw to house hacking is that it offsets your mortgage. So, for example, if you were to purchase a duplex, it's 2 units, but you have 1 mortgage. So let's use an example real quick. Let's say you purchase a duplex and your total mortgage every month is $3,000. I know that sounds like a lot, but just for square round numbers, let's use $3,000. Every month, regardless of what happens, you as the homeowner have to pay $3,000 a month to your mortgage company, regardless, right? Well, whenever you close on the house, the other half is actually rented out for $1,600. That's a good common duplex price here in Fort Worth. Just from experience of renting out a few myself, $1,600 is a good round number for a duplex here in Fort Worth. So you have a $3,000 mortgage, regardless, every month that you have to pay, and then you happen to have good tenants next door who pay $1,600 every month. So now, by doing that, you've offset your mortgage by quite a bit, by more than half. And so that is the biggest draw. So instead of having to cover the full $3,000, you now have rental income, and technically your out-of-pocket cost every month would be the $1,400 that's left over after the rental payment. I hope that makes sense for everybody. A $3,000 mortgage in total, $1,600 of income for the rent from next door, then you're left with the rest of the mortgage, which is $1,400. Now I bet you're starting to see why exactly this is such an incredible investment strategy. Now, before we move on to some of the numbers and stuff that we're going to go through, I mentioned 3.5% down to 5%. That is using an FHA loan or an owner-occupied conventional loan, which would be the 5%. Those are both great low-cost entry loans that real estate investors can use as they're starting out. FHA is most commonly known as the first-time home buyer loan. Of course, as a first-time home buyer, you qualify for that. For all of my active and retired military out there, first, thank you so much for your service. Second, your VA home loan could actually be used for house hacking as well. So for all of our active and retired military, you could put 0% down on a property and begin real estate investing right now. For those of you who are still active, like we have many here in Fort Worth, if you purchase that, you live in it for a year using your 0% VA loan, and then you get PCI'd somewhere across state lines, you move out and you're now renting 2 units. You have 2 units worth of income coming in because you bought a duplex or triplex, fourplex, and so on. And so 3.5% down is the most common down payment for house hacking. But for our military members out there, it could get as low as 0% down. Now, let's dig a little bit deeper into these loans, because Not everybody, because it'd be too much of a hack if you could just put 3.5% down, rent out both sides, and call it good. A lot of these loans that allow for a lower down payment, the FHA, for example, is a first-time home buyer loan. Whenever you're approved for the loan and whenever you close on the house, there is a contingency in there that states that you must owner occupy the home for at least 12 months. So if you use one of these low down payment options, keep in mind that you cannot close on the house and then rent out both units immediately. You would need to be committed to living in one of the units for at least 12 months. Same thing if you did the roommate strategy. You'd have to buy the house like a single family home. You could rent the rooms all you want, but you still have to live in one of them for at least 12 months. After the 12 months is up, 1 year from your closing date, you can move, you can rent both sides, you can rent the house out in its entirety, and then you now have a fully occupied rental property, and now you can go buy another primary residence somewhere else. All right, and so here in a second, we're going to go through the pros and cons of house hacking. Like I told you, I like to put all of our cards on the table. I'm 29 years old, so I still play around on TikTok. I still like to look at all the reels, and I look at all of them. But by no means am I the guy who's going to sit here and say, oh, I'm a guru. You can house hack and get your whole mortgage covered, because I've seen those videos, and it's a load of BS. So we like to keep family friendly, just in case you're listening with your family in the car, but it's a load of BS basically, right? Not everything you see on TikTok is 100% true. House hacking is, in my opinion, one of the best ways to get started in real estate investing, but there are some pros and there are some cons, so we're going to go through those as well. But first, it's extremely important that you run your numbers. Just because you happen to find a duplex and just because you happen to live in one side of it doesn't mean the numbers are always going to work out. This is still an investment. You still need to look at two things: your mortgage and what that total mortgage is going to be, and then your market rents for each side of the duplex, because it's still an investment. There's still risk, and if you can't cover your mortgage with the rents that come in, maybe it's not a good deal, right? Over time, of course, the property will appreciate. Of course, rents will raise, but you still want to make sure that you're purchasing a good property. You're not just getting into it so that you can say, oh, I started real estate investing. I'm a landlord and I have a rental who lives right next to me, but they only cover a few $100 of my mortgage, right? You don't want to get into that. So it's still very important to analyze your deal as if this was a standard investment. So here's in depth what exactly to analyze. First thing that you're going to want to analyze is your total monthly mortgage payment. There's a lot of things factored into it. So without going too deep into it, it's broken down by 4 things: your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Those 4 things make up your total monthly mortgage payment that you make. One thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you can afford that full mortgage payment without the supplement of the rest of the units, because vacancy is a huge killer in real estate. So what I mean by that is if you purchase the duplex and the tenant right next door, their lease comes up and they move out, one unit's occupied by you, the other side's vacant. There's no rental income coming in. And if it takes a month to rent that property, guess who's responsible for that full mortgage payment? That's you. When running your numbers for this duplex, you want to make sure that you can financially cover that full mortgage payment regardless if there's a tenant in there or not. The fact that there is a tenant is just a bonus, and you don't have to. But vacancy does happen. So make sure that you can cover that full mortgage payment. The second half of that is you want to prepare for what the rents are going to be, because ideally vacancy is only for a few weeks out of the year. So what are you going to expect those rents to be? Because most of the time duplexes are split right down the middle. They're the same on each side. So let's assume that for this podcast, if you run comps or you get a realtor, you get Mason from First Choice Property Management to run comps for you on your duplex. Let's say that it's going to rent for $1,600 a month. Like I said earlier, great. That means that half of the duplex is going to rent for $1,600. It's a safe bet to say that the other side of the duplex, the one that you're living in, could rent for the same as well, as long as it's in the same condition and same size and everything like that. So you can assume that you're going to have 2 units, each paying you $1,600 a month after you move out, right? When it's all said and done. Because at some point you're going to move out, you're going to rent out both units. You want to make sure that those rental prices match up with your mortgage. If you're going to make $1,600 from both sides, at $3,200 total, if your monthly mortgage payment is $4,000, then that means when you move and you rent both sides out, you're going to be upside down $800 a month at the very least. And you're still going to have to make up that cost. And so you do still want to run these numbers. So house hacking is not a foolproof investment strategy. You still have to make sure that the numbers work. You are checking a lot of boxes by going the house hacking route. However, the numbers are the most important thing. Because like I said, if you have a $4,000 mortgage, if that thing's empty, the tenants don't pay rent, you have to cover that full thing. And so, one, make sure that you can afford it before closing on it. And then two, make sure that the rents from both sides will cover the full mortgage, because at some point you're going to want to move out and rent out both units. So make sure that you run your numbers, make sure it makes sense before actually pulling the trigger and purchasing it. And then of course, if you need help running comps or analyzing a deal or anything like that, shoot me a message. You can find me online, reach out to me, leave a comment, and I'm happy to help you analyze a deal. Okay, cool. So now let's get into the meat and beans of it. So the pros and cons of house hacking, what everybody wants to know. So I've already covered a bunch of the pros. So let's go back and hit what some of the pros are, because we all know it's a great investment strategy now, but let's cover some. So pros of house hacking: lower cost of living. You're not having to cover your full mortgage balance every single month. You get to learn landlording firsthand. Right? The second you move in, you're going to be trying to rent out that other unit, and then you're going to become a landlord fairly quick, right? Once that tenant moves in, or they're already living in it, you're going to be a landlord pretty quick. So for our first-time investors, for those who want to get into real estate investing, you're going to learn landlording fairly quick, and then a bunch of our other episodes on the Fort Worth Property Management podcast are going to guide you along the way as well. Third pro is it's very easy to manage a tenant because you're right next door, or you're within the same house. So managing that is very easy. Of course, one of the biggest pros is you build equity that somebody else pays down, right? With that rent income, they're covering your mortgage. After 12 months, you get to transition the property into a full rental, even after just 1 year. Both units can be rented out if you choose to move out after that first year. And then this is a strategy that you can repeat every few years and build a pretty good portfolio. And so these are just a few of the pros that happen with house hacking, but they are all incredible. It's such a great way to start real estate investing. Like I mentioned, I'm going to shoot you straight. I'm going to tell you my honest reaction to these investment strategies, okay? So we're going to go through the cons and the risks of house hacking as well. So let's be realistic. There's one glaring problem with house hacking. So the first con is that you're living next to or with your tenants. That's a big one. That's a no for a lot of people. And so if you're listening to this right now and you're married with kids, this might not be the best investment strategy for you, unless your wife's like, heck yeah, let's dive right into it, right? If you like your privacy, this may not be the best investment strategy for you, because a lot of duplexes are right side by side and their front doors are quite right next to each other. So privacy can sometimes be a pretty big concern. And then also, if the tenant's living in the unit next to you whenever you purchase it, you don't know who screened them. You don't know the type of person who's living there. And now you're going to be living quite literally 5 feet away from their front door. Right? So it's kind of an apartment type situation. So there are some privacy concerns. There are the fact that you're living right next to your tenant, that is a con as well. So if that's something that makes you uncomfortable, you probably want to stay away from this investment strategy. And then let's get a little bit deeper into the landlording and tenant problems. Whenever there is a discrepancy, whenever there is a dispute, a problem, the conflicts will feel personal. You're right next door. You probably see this person every few days in passing. And now that there's a problem, it's going to feel a little bit personal because this is your neighbor. It's like you're pissed off at your next door neighbor because they're a day late on rent, right? It becomes a little bit more personal. It's kind of like the old saying, never lend your family money, right? Because if they don't pay you back, how awkward is that? How awful is that? Now you're mad at your relative, and it's kind of like that. It's like my next door neighbor's there. They are mad at me or I'm mad at them for some reason. And so those conflicts start to feel very personal. And personal emotions when real estate investing is never good. It never goes good. And so that's a big thing with house hacking too, is that you got to do your best to keep it separate while being the landlord. Some people even go as far as not letting that person know that they're the owner. Of course, not lying to them, not being unethical, but just simply not stating that I'm the owner of the house, right? They pay rent, they do everything over the phone. They try and keep it separate. But if you can't, if your doors are quite literally right next to each other, some of those conflicts will feel very personal. So prepare yourself for that just in case. It's not every time, by all means. It's not every time, but it definitely can be. Another con that I kind of mentioned a little bit ago is that when a unit is vacant, it directly affects your personal finances. Usually with a separate investment property, you'll know a vacancy is coming up. You'll have a savings account. You'll kind of have a different budget for that. But with this one, it's your personal mortgage. It is your owner-occupied personal mortgage. And so when a vacancy comes up, you have to cover the full balance of the mortgage, which is usually a little bit higher due to the fact that the property was a tad bit more expensive if you bought like the duplex, triplex route, if you went that route. So that is one thing that, if you have a bad tenant or if they move out, then it directly affects your personal finances as well. And then, of course, the last thing, which I kind of mentioned earlier, is that vacancy. When the unit next door goes vacant, it directly affects your personal finances. When that tenant moves out and the property is vacant, you're now responsible for that full mortgage payment. And it's usually a little bit higher of a mortgage payment because the sales prices of the duplex, triplex, and fourplexes are higher than your standard single family home. And so you typically have a little bit higher mortgage, and then when it goes vacant, it's your responsibility to cover that all. And so when vacancy occurs, it directly affects your personal finances, which can be a pretty big con for a lot of people. So keep that in mind. Now, these cons, in my book, they don't outweigh the pros, especially for newer or younger real estate investors. House hacking is an incredible investment strategy for getting started. And if you're listening to this, you're probably wanting to get into real estate at some point. And so there are only one or two issues on this cons list that are different than if you just purchased a regular rental property. And that would be the ones of the privacy and living right next door. Those will go away with you purchasing a single family home. But the risk, the mortgage, all of that is still the same as if you were to buy your own rental property. And so my advice to those who are considering this and who just listen to the cons, here's how to combat some of them. One, to solve the vacancy problem, have a reserve fund, have some type of nest egg just in case a few months, I'd say 3 months worth of the rental price. If your rental price is $1,600, multiply that by 3, you want to have roughly $5,000 in a savings account just in case that house goes vacant. Okay? That'll solve that problem. The rest. House hacking works best if you treat it like a business, not a roommate situation. Now, roommates is a little difficult to do that with the duplexes, triplexes. You have to treat it like a business. If you need to not tell your tenants that you're the owner, so be it. But you have to treat it like a business and remove the emotion. You have to be able to enforce the lease, make sure you get your rent payments, and then still treat this like an investment. Okay, you got to take it serious like it's a normal investment strategy. So let's make it a little bit more local. Let's talk about the greater Fort Worth area specifically. So in Dallas-Fort Worth, the way that house hacking is the most prevalent is through those smaller multifamilies that I mentioned. So this will be your duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. There's a lot of duplexes in the city of Fort Worth. You can find some in Southwest Fort Worth. You can find some near Camp Bowie area. There's even some in Saginaw and Keller. And usually they're duplex communities. So you'll have a full street or streets of duplexes, right? So you would find the ones that are for sale. You would go look at the conditions, and then you will also look at the leases whenever you're considering buying. There are some triplexes spread out throughout the city, but those are a little less common. Those usually have like an ADU or something converted. And then there are some fourplexes. You'll see fourplexes. The ones that perform the best are in Keller. They're actually set up like townhomes, but they manage to be sold as a fourplex. And so there are some in Keller, but we manage some of them as well. Keller has some fourplexes that operate very well. There are some fourplexes in West Fort Worth near White Settlement. They're like on Las Vegas Trail or something like that. I would stay away from those personally. They are fourplexes. Of course, they will rent out, but you also got to look at the area as well. One thing that house hacking will blatantly point out is if you purchased a bad investment or not. Because if you move into one of the units and you don't feel safe where you're living, it's probably a bad investment. That is one thing that house hacking will point out very quick. So you want to purchase something in an area that you're comfortable living in as well. That will help your investment perform better over time. North Fort Worth does have a lot of HOAs. So make sure that if you're wanting to do the ADU or convert a garage or something like that, you're not purchasing in an HOA. You will have some restrictions and you won't be able to do all of that. And then staying on the ADU and garage route, there are typically some city permits that are needed by Fort Worth or Tarrant County. I can't remember which one, but you will need to get some permits to convert that garage. Based on experience, I will say duplexes and then fourplexes in good areas like Keller, they stay occupied. It is extremely hard not to rent those things out. You really got to have a duplex in bad condition not to rent them out. Now, you got to get the price right. You can't just list it at anything, but we list it on the market and they typically fly off. People love duplexes because you get the benefit, you get almost all the benefits of a single family home, but the benefit of a lower rental price because it's a duplex. Duplex average prices are about $1,400 to $1,600, and then single family homes can range anywhere from $1,800 up to $2,500, right? So if you're willing to live in a duplex, you get the benefit of a single family home, but for a way lower rental price. North Richland Hills is another city with duplexes that perform incredibly. That's where I wanted to buy. And I was engaged at the time that I was getting into real estate investing. So unfortunately, my now incredible wife, Cameron, I don't think it would have been ideal for us to have house hacked a duplex to begin our marriage and as we're starting to think about having kids. And so that was not in the cards for me. I bought a single family home and then rented it out after a year of living in it. So North Richland Hills is also a very good one that has a lot of duplexes that rent out pretty solidly. Now, I know you clicked on this and you're listening to this because you're super excited of getting involved in real estate investing, but I do want to be clear that house hacking is not for everybody. So let's talk through a few situations where I do think it is applicable and where you would very well fit the box of those who should house hack and who would be successful with it. So first-time home buyers with limited capital, I think you are the target for house hacking. You use your FHA loan, your first-time home buyer loan, and then you don't have to put that $75,000 down, right? You put $10,000 down, you have some money in a bank account to cover vacancy, you're good. Call it 15 grand, you can get it done. So, first-time home buyers with slightly limited capital, house hacking is definitely for you. Now, going back on some of the pros and cons in your stage of life right now, another type of person who would benefit from house hacking or who should house hack are those people willing to sacrifice some comfort for the short term. So, if I had been financially in the position to purchase a property maybe a year or two before my wife and I started dating, I probably would have house hacked. This would have been my investment strategy because as a single man in his 20s, I'm completely fine living in one side of a duplex and having neighbors share a wall with me. I have no problem with it. I could care less and I want to real estate invest. However, my wife would probably feel differently. She wants the privacy. She wants the full backyard. She doesn't want to hear people on the wall at night, right? And so if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of comfort for short term, I think house hacking is for you. Again, it's not like it's going to be awful having somebody. If you live in an apartment, it's going to be pretty dang similar to that, right? But it's a small sacrifice for a great gain a little bit longer. If you want to get into real estate investing and you plan on being pretty hands-on on it, this will be a good strategy for you. You'll get to learn landlording firsthand. You'll literally live right next door to your investment, and you'll learn very quickly, and you'll be very hands-on. And then vice versa. If you need full privacy, if you don't like interacting with tenants very often, or if you are currently living paycheck to paycheck, I don't think house hacking is the strategy for you. It is still something that costs some money. that you're going to be seeing your tenants maybe a few times a week as you are passing by. You're bringing in the groceries, stuff like that. So it is going to kick you out of your comfort zone just a little bit, but it's an incredible strategy. The numbers work out incredibly if you do it right. And then within 13 months, you could have 2 fully occupied units bringing in income for you, right? I mean, house hacking is not glamorous, but it is one of the most powerful ways to break into real estate. For the first year, you solve 2 major problems. You figure out your place to live and you own where you live. And then you get into real estate investing immediately by renting out that portion of your primary residence. Those are probably 2 of the biggest things you want right now. You want to own your home and you want to start real estate investing. You solve both of those the second you close and you rent out that side. And then after 12 months, you move out, you find a tenant to live in the side that you're living in. Now you have a fully occupied duplex, 2 units, or triplex or fourplex, and they're all paying you rent. They're covering your mortgage, and then in a few years you can go do it again, or you can now buy your own single family home and your wife can have the privacy that she wants. But house hacking is incredible. It's not always glamorous, but it is a great way to begin your real estate investing journey. Now, like I said, there is a lot of analysis. There is a lot to consider. If you want to talk a little bit more about it, feel free to DM me or shoot me a message with any of the analysis that you're doing on your deals right now. I'm happy to run it for you, give you some idea on if you should or shouldn't purchase the property. I will be able to give a lot of guidance on the duplex prices in the neighborhood. Also, visit fortworthpropertymanagement.com. That is our website. There's a lot of good info on there. And then there is a free rental analysis tool that will actually tell you instantly what your property can rent for. So head over there, put the address in, put the specs in, and then you'll get a free rental analysis for you. And then, like I mentioned at the very beginning, this is part 1 of our investment strategy series. And so in the future parts, we're going to be talking through buy and hold. We're going to be talking through flips. And then, of course, we're going to be talking through the BRRRR method, subject to, creative financing. We're going to go through all types of different investment strategies that people are using right now to acquire properties, so that you can help build your portfolio, or you can get into real estate investing in each way that you see fit. Stay tuned for part 2 in a few podcasts. We are going to sprinkle in some different topics that are outside of investment strategies, but we will put out a few different parts to our investment strategy series soon. And then if there is something that you specifically want to hear or learn about, leave it in the comments, shoot me a message. We will build that topic for a future podcast for you. And then my last ask, thank you so much for sticking around. My last ask is that we want to get to know our listeners. Don't be a stranger. We like you to be our friend. So leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from. I want to hear how you got involved with us. I want to hear who sent you the podcast. So leave a comment. Let me know what you like about it. I am obeying my listeners. So tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. Be my friend. Shoot me an email. My email is mason@firstchoicepm. That's 1stchoicepm.com. That is my email address. Shoot me an email. I'm happy to help however we can. And then that will conclude episode 7. Great episode. Episode 7 of the Fort Worth Property Management Podcast. I am your host, Mason Arispe. Thank you so much for tuning in and sticking around for this whole episode. I can't wait for you to hear what we have in store. We'll catch you next time. Have a good rest of your day.